Hi, welcome to Cubs and Culture for, I might get this up today, 9/10 2018. Continuing on with the Best Picture winners, we have Cimarron. It came out in 1931. It's the often cited as one of the weaker Best Picture winners, as you can tell by the tomato meter. Okay, so at one point in this country, about 50% of all movies made were Westerns. In some way or another, a lot of this was cheap B-Westerns, white hat, black hat stuff. And amazingly enough, there's only a handful of Best Picture winners who are Westerns. And Cimarron was the first one, and for an extremely long time, until Dances with Wolves in 1990. It was the only one, which is somewhat shocking because you had like The Searchers and The Stagecoach and a whole bunch of really good classical westerns, or High Noon in 1951 or whatever. And to this day, there's only been, depending on how you feel about No Country for Old Men, there's only three other, either two or three other westerns that have won Best Picture. Now, Cimarron is a film I actually mostly like. I like westerns a lot, and it's a good melodramatic western in the sense of it having an epic scope, and there's a lot of open vistas, and there's a couple of cool shootouts and everything like that. But the film, if I can briefly talk about the plot, it's about this guy named Yancey. And his wife, let me look at the name real fast. Sabra, settling Oklahoma. So it's an empire story where they build an empire, a newspaper empire, but it's mostly about Yancey taming the wildness of Oklahoma in different spheres. So like the streets, and then the church, and then the court, and then the political system. That's basically the through line here, and that's all good, and it's actually sort of an interesting story structure in that way. The one thing about it is Richard Dix, make sure I'm getting the name right, he's incredibly 1930s ham in this. So the movie has sort of it's supposed to be a serious film, or a tasteful drama, but it comes across as a really pitched, stilted melodrama because of Richard Dix. Irene Dunn, who plays Sabra, is a much more understated performance, and I really like her performance. So there's that main problem. But then the other thing I want to talk about, and this is actually mostly what I show the clips about, is so everyone always says the Oscars are leftists, and they're not. They're liberal, and I think this movie is a perfect example of this because this movie has a series of nice sort of touches, which I'll go into and I'll show you, which can come across as somewhat leftist if you're not paying attention to the broader context. So that's mostly the sort of clips I'm going to show you. So I guess warning, there's going to be a little bit of offensive material here, so there's that. So let me pause and bring up the trailer and stuff. Okay, so I just realized that I have a little bit more to say than the clips will allow me to cover. I don't want to show random scenes in the movie to give enough time. So the movie, the tension in this movie, Cimarron, sort of politically, is it's kind of really progressive for the time, but also sort of marred in the zeitgeist of the 1930s around race and gender. So like the movie, so one of the things about it is Yancey has wanderlust and he wanders away a lot. So Sabra ends up running the newspaper, so she becomes this like an independent woman, and she becomes a congressman, which is all cool. And then sort of also on race is Yancey repeatedly criticizes the white power structure for basically screwing over Native Americans, First People, whatever, which is all good. And then sort of the main sort of central point is him running this editorial in favor of Indians' rights, and then there's also a very veiled reference to or analogy to the Dome Teapot scandal in the 1920s, which is how he's cleaning up the political system, and that's all well and good. It's still, though, the movie's sort of chock full of stock characters, which are offensive racial caricatures, and so that's mostly what I'm going to show you in terms of clips. So there's this weird tension when the movie feels, in some ways, very, very modern in that it's dealing with like a simulation and that Native Americans didn't get a fair deal, but on the other hand, it doesn't feel like, it feels like the critique stops halfway, and it feels like, yes, it's okay that we stole the Indians' land as long as we then integrate them into our society, whereas that's sort of a liberal, neoliberal thought, whereas leftists are like, no, it's not okay that we committed genocide and we need to pay reparations. So let me bring up some of those clips now. Okay, give me a moment. Okay, so the first bit I want to talk about, that's Yancey, is this character. His name is Isaiah, and he's basically, this is just a term of the caricature. He's basically a coon. Again, not my terminology, it's just a term used, which is an imbecilic black character from the 1930s that was in minstrel shows, etc. He'll be coming up here in a second. And this character, Isaiah, he has a couple of bits, and he's mostly in there for comic relief, and he is an absolutely racist, horrible stereotype. Come on, where is it? Don't tell me I deleted him. Should be here in a second. There he is, right there. And he's going to fall down here, and it's basically a comic relief section, and he's going to go over and sort of plead his case to Yancey, and it's totally like a white savior thing. And it is sort of offensively, disgustingly, overtly racist. So there's that, and he's often sort of the butt of the joke, as you'll see in the next sequence, starting here, because they're heading to church. Because he's got to start up a church, blah, blah, blah. And there's Isaiah again, and he's supposed to be dressed in his Sunday finery and everything like that, and people are laughing at him, including the main character, so he is absolutely treated as a butt of a joke here. And Yancey's going to patronize him, and again, it's also, again, this is pretty standard. Again, this is not my terminology, it's just what the character is called. It's pretty much... I wish it had a different name, because it has, it's a racial slur, but, you know, he's treated as the character type coon, excuse me, and that's really unfortunate. But what's weird about this is this scene right here, Isaiah dies, and he's treated, and he's given a tragic, heroic death, because he's trying to save Yancey's kid, Cimarron, and the character through the entire time is, you know, treated as a butt of a joke, but then he's given this very almost touching death, and while trying to save the main character's kid. And so there's that sort of weird progressive, because it's like, yes, he's a racial stereotype, but then he's also given a little bit of dignity, which you don't normally get. And then kind of continuing the same vein, there's this other character. That man's Jewish. Solomon's his name, and he's going to be bullied here by a bunch of outlaws, and Yancey's going to come along and save him. And it's, again, it's supposed to be, these outlaws obviously are not supposed to be good characters, and you're supposed to dislike them, and so you're supposed to sympathize with this Jewish character right here. And there's a couple of things about him. Is one, he, again, it's sort of an ethnic stereotype in that you know, he's a merchant, and then, you know, he's hook-nosed and, you know, short and everything like that. He's pretty stereotypically Jewish, and there's that. And then the other sort of weird thing again, because I guess it's supposed to be like, and he's an outsider, and he's supposed to be being rescued here. This is Christ imagery, because like he just gets crucified, and it's sort of over the top. And again, there's sort of this weird tension because like the character himself is is an ethnic stereotype caricature, which is offensive and problematic and a whole bunch of other things. But at the same time, the character is treated with a somewhat of a fair amount of dignity. Apart from that, so it's like it's strangely, weirdly progressive in that they realize that like Jewish the problems against Jewish people, but at the same time it's sort of the other like it's trying to have its cake and eat it too. And then to kind of finish that theme, there's this little scene at the church where he comes and he asks if it's okay if he's there, and Yancey says yes, and then at the end he says welcome to the first, and he lists a whole bunch of denominations, and at the end it says Hebrew. Excuse me, just to make sure you get the point. And then, so this is what I sort of mean by not really leftist or not really liberal, because, I mean, it's more, Oscars are more liberal and not so leftist, is because the left, like, this scene's ultimately saying, because everyone comes to church, and there's a whole bunch of churches, but the one group that is explicitly excluded from this scene, it's supposed to be like setting up of intellectual society, blah blah, order and being imposed under the wilderness, is our atheists. So it doesn't matter what belief system you have, what denomination you have, because everyone's included, including Jewish people, but atheists are explicitly excluded. And so there's that sort of, you know, neoliberal big tent thing with it, where it's not as biting as true leftism would be. Okay, so then there's this scene. The girl in the foreground is Ruby. She's supposed to be Native American. I highly doubt the actress is Native American, and that's Cimarron, the kid, who's the kid's name, and he's eventually going to marry Ruby. And so there's this interracial relationship, which the mother initially objects, but she gets over it, blah blah blah, and they get married at the end. And again, there's this strangely sort of progressive in that it's an interracial relationship that's treated mostly with dignity, and even though the mother objects, she gets over the objection, and it's just sort of treated as a matter of fact. But again, it feels much more simulationist, because apart from everything else, the actress here is not Native American. The tribe they're referencing is fake, not a natural tribe. I highly doubt they did any sort of research into her dress to make it authentic or anything like that. So again, it feels very, very liberal to me at this time, because it's not sort of like, it's okay that we committed well, it's not okay, but it's okay that we committed genocide against the Native Americans. We can make them members of our families now, as long as we now treat them as equal citizens. All has been forgiven, which is kind of a very liberal sort of thing. I mean, this element, again, because it's not really focused on, it's mostly in the background, but it's sort of a fulfillment of Yancey's desire to see Native Americans treated with dignity, that it's such a weird thing. So anyway, in the end of Cimarron, showing the trailer, it's a really, as a Western, it's fun. It has a lot of great shootouts and stuff, and it's surprisingly well put together on that front. Richard Dix has sort of a bad performance, but that's okay. Overall, I really do like this film. It's just sort of a weird Best Picture winner because of everything. So I'll see you guys later. Have a good night.